All right, hey everybody. Looks like we're live and up and working, and we've got a few people watching. It looks like there's already some activity in the chat. But for everybody who's joining us, welcome. Thanks for joining. This is my post NAB or post Blackmagic Design NAB announcement video that I have traditionally done every year after Blackmagic does an announcement video. Excited to talk about some of these new products that they've announced, and it seems fairly clear what direction Blackmagic is intending to make here in the next little while based on the announcements that they're making, and of course I will cover that as we go. So for anybody who's joining live, you can certainly pop questions into the chat, and I will be trying to monitor that at least periodically throughout the course of this video. And I'd love to hear not only your questions, but also your opinions on some of the things that are being announced, some of the things that are coming out, some of the changes that are taking place with Blackmagic. And yeah, so, I mean, I can already see a few people saying stuff in the chat, and it looks like a lot of their thoughts kind of mirror my own to some degree as to what's going on and some of the changes that are happening as part of Blackmagic. So I'll also get this right out of the way. So anybody who's wondering, I will be attending NAB this year. I will be there on the show floor on Monday and Tuesday. So if you happen to see me, please walk up and say hello. I like meeting you guys in person. Don't feel intimidated because I'm someone on the internet that you haven't conversed with in person or whatever. Please stop me and say hello. I always like to meet you and put faces to names and just kind of have that interaction and just kind of chat with you a little bit as we go. So I'm more than open to having conversations with anybody who's there. The only thing I would ask is if I happen to be shooting something, obviously leave me alone while I'm doing that. But any other time you see me walking around, just walk up and say hello, introduce yourself, and nice to have a quick chat with you. So again, okay, so anybody, go ahead and leave any questions or comments in the chat, and I will try and get to those as well. Looks like we've got a fair number of people in there. I can see a few comments from some names that I recognize. All right, so it's pretty clear that the big direction for the live switching portion of Blackmagic's product line is moving more in the direction of ST2110. It seems to be they're really doubling down on that, and that seems to be the way that they want to be taking things in the future, taking that in that direction. So for anybody who is not familiar, ST2110 is a way of doing video over Ethernet networks. That usually means 10 gigabit Ethernet connections to cameras, sometimes faster, but generally speaking 10 gigabit Ethernet connections to cameras rather than using SDI cables, HDMI cables, that kind of thing. It all goes over a network, just like a computer or whatever device you might want to plug into a network. Of course, this requires a lot more data than a typical computer would normally be using over a network, and therefore we have to have some higher end devices for processing all of that data. And Blackmagic seems really trying to avoid some of the shortcomings that they have had in those areas in the past. So it's been clear for the last couple of years that they were really embracing 2110, but this year is kind of really making the last moves of some of their products into that area. So it's kind of interesting to see what they're doing. For anybody who's doing small productions, this 2110 stuff probably doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, and that's kind of what I'm seeing in the chat as people are discussing it. It's really designed more for larger productions, larger facilities. I mean, 2110 is really something that is being used primarily by larger production houses, like your news studios and, the Olympics and things like that. Those things are all running on 2110 at this point. So all the connections between devices is done using Ethernet. That does bring some serious advantages in terms of being able to route signals around. In the more traditional way that we work, we will use video routers to get video from a source device to a destination device, or direct cable connections. Whereas with the 2110 based stuff, the need for a router is basically kind of gone, because basically any device that wants to receive a copy of any video can, because it's all on the same network. And so that does provide some serious advantages there. But it does bring some challenges as well. And one of the big challenges that comes with 2110, which has prevented me from adopting it in any kind of meaningful way, is latency. So this is not something necessarily that is super compatible with the workflow that I end up doing most of the time, which is something where we do iMags. We're taking images from cameras and putting them up on projector screens. The extra latency that's added by doing 2110 can make that process a little less ideal than the workflow that I happen to be using. So, for my workflow, I use SDI quite often over fiber cables, but for a lot of situations, 2110 can make some sense. So it's interesting to see where Blackmagic is going with this, and in some cases, it actually means some of the equipment's actually a little bit cheaper. So as we get into kind of the first couple products that they announced, we'll notice that the prices on the 2110 based versions are actually a little lower than the SDI equivalents. So, all right. So with that said, I'm gonna get my computer set up here where we can actually look at some of the products. So the first thing that Blackmagic actually introduced today was going to be the IP versions of their ATEM switchers. So anybody who's familiar with Blackmagic switchers in the past, those have been either SDI or IP based. And what they're doing now is they're introducing their first ATEM switcher that's based on 2110. So that's one of the most startling things about this is the new design. They have come up with a completely new design language for these new products. And part of that is functional, and part of that I think is just constantly evolving the way your product's appearance and kind of the styling. And in this case, they have moved to this new model where airflow takes place goes from the front of the product to the back of the product, where most of the Blackmagic products in the past have actually used airflow from side to side, from one side to the other, and they haven't exactly been 100% consistent about what direction they do that. So this allows for better cooling, especially as you get into higher end racks. So that's kind of an interesting choice that they make. But one of the nice things about 2110 is you end up having fewer connections for all your devices. So all right. So here are the two products that they announced in terms of the ATEM switchers. So there's the ATEM 4ME Constellation IP, of course, meaning Internet Protocol, which is what 2110 uses. Then they have the ATEM 4ME Constellation IP Plus, which is a bigger version of that. Now, if we flip around and take a look at the back view, you can see that these have a lot fewer connections on the back than some of their other switchers they've had in the past. So this top one, this is a 32 input switcher. Let's see, that's 32 inputs and 28 outputs, which is 24 main outputs, which are source selectable, and then 4 multi-view outputs. And so what they've done is they have these connections coming in over what's called a QSFP. So that is a way of doing a high-speed, in this case, 100 gigabit Ethernet connection, and you would normally use fiber for this. I mean, that's certainly the most common way of doing that. So you have fiber cables that interconnect your various devices. So in this case, you'd have fiber cables coming in from other devices which are providing video for your network, which would be a camera or an actual Ethernet switch, so that you're able to provide video for multiple cameras. And what they've done here is they've got 4 groups of paired connections, and the pairing is there for redundancy. So you can actually have 2 separate networks that are have the same sources and same destinations on them, so that if one network happens to experience issues, it will be the slack will be picked up by the second one. So if you've got a network that's maybe not as reliable, or a connection that's maybe not as reliable, it will be able to use the second. So each one of these connections can handle up to 8 sources at Ultra HD, up to 60 frames per second. And for anybody who is wondering, the Blackmagic, when it comes to 50 frames and 60 frames per second with Ultra HD, they have their own codec that they use for doing 2110, which is not quite part of the SMPTE 2110 standard. So if you're having to be dealing in those resolutions and frame rates, and need to interact with other equipment on your 2110 network, you may find that these devices may not work the way that you were expecting them to, particularly with outputs on the switchers and the cameras. But anyway, so each of these 4 connections can accept 8 cameras, 8 sources, and can do 8 outputs. Each connection is bidirectional. They are full duplex, so they can both send and receive video at the same time, and each one will handle up to 8. So you get to the bigger model here, and this one does 64 inputs and 52 outputs, so that's 48 outputs, selectable outputs, and then 4 multi-view outputs on there as well. They also have some various other Ethernet connections on here. So there's one for configurations / upgrades, and then there's this pair here that's used for a clock, because on a 2110 network, all your video sources are in sync with one another, and that's done with what's called a PTP clock, and all the devices need to be using the same clock. And then we have some other ports here for control and things like uploading video footage and media stills, images, that kind of thing. So yeah, so then move to the second one, 64 ins and 52 outputs. Now, one of the interesting things about these is that the smaller one, even though this is a 4ME Constellation model, it's actually cheaper than the 4ME SDI version. Part of that is allegedly going to be because it has a little bit fewer inputs on it than the bigger one. So this one does 32, and the SDI version does 40 inputs. But anyway, so the pricing on this one is $79.95 US, subject to tariffs, import fees, whatever. And then the bigger one is $12,995. The 4K SDI version of this is just a little bit under $10,000. So this one is about $2,000 less, but we won't know exact pricing until they actually really do ship. And seeing what's going on with the tariff situation here in the U.S. and so forth. So yeah, these are the two models, the 4ME Constellation IP and the 4ME Constellation IP Plus. And these do all of their video inputs and outputs using 2110 IP. So in a lot of cases, anybody who's going to be doing 2110 was going to also need to support legacy connections like SDI, and that's what this one here is, the SDI expander. So this device is a converter, bidirectional converter, so it gives you 8 ins, 8 outs of SDI, and that comes over one single 2110 100 gig connection. So you take one of these connections here and then route that to the equivalent input on the ATEM switcher on the back using a pretty inexpensive fiber cable. So yeah, so they also have this other device here, which is for consolidating video from devices which use their 10 gigabit connections. This is what they call the Studio Bridge 10G power, and it has your 100 gigabit connection for connecting to your ATEM or your switch, and then 8 individual 10 gigabit connection for going to individual cameras or any of their other converter products which happen to use 10 gigabit copper Ethernet, and you'll be able to connect those there as well. Now, if you have more than 8 sources, which most productions that are going to be using 2110 will, then you're going to need Ethernet switches in order to route that video around your network. And that's what this 100 gigabit Ethernet switch is all about. So they've had a smaller one, which was they called the 360p. And then they've just introduced this newer one, which has more connections on the back. So it has 8 individual 100 gigabit connections. So you can connect 8 different devices, each one of those 8 different video sources to and from. And so this expands your video capability up to 64 sources in and out. Now, as mentioned, when you're doing a 2110, you don't need a video router. So as long as devices are on the same Ethernet network, any device can receive video from any other device. And so that's the main big advantage with going with 2110 over some of the other ways of doing connections with video. So anyway, so in terms of those other products, so the Blackmagic SDI expander, this one right here, this is going to be $2,995 and it'll be available in June. So, of course, take all of these prices and these dates with a grain of salt. Blackmagic has typically been pretty late in shipping their products. They very often will announce products be available in the summer, and then they don't show up until fall, if not even later. So if these are products that you're planning on getting, make sure that you've got plenty of time in your plans to allow them to actually start shipping. And I would also advise giving a little bit of time for them to work out any bugs, because the first versions of these things do tend to have a little bit of quirkiness to them. So, yeah. The next product here we mentioned was the Studio Bridge 10G Power. And this unit is, what's the pricing on that one? It's going to be $24.95, available in July. Again, usual caveats apply to there as well. And the Ethernet switch, let's see. I know I wrote that one down. Let's see what the pricing on that one was. Okay, yeah, the pricing. Ethernet switch, Blackmagic Ethernet switch 820. It's going to be available for $22.95 starting in June. For a switch that handles this much traffic, that's actually a bargain of a price. And I presume it's probably also going to act as the PTP, Precision Time Protocol, time sync source, because that's the approach that Blackmagic has taken with their products in the past. So hopefully that will take care of that. So I'm sure it's gonna have all the required protocols to make 2110 video work just fine without having to add additional equipment. So, all right. So with that, let me jump over into the chat and see what you've got for comments and questions. All right. So Debrito of 147, that's got to be Joe. That was an impressive update right there. It now makes me think twice about the IP 2110 equipment. So, yeah, so, I mean, they're very clearly fleshing out their entire setup and making sure that they have all the equipment that it takes to do a full, real, proper 2110 implementation. All right. It's nice to see the kit coming up. We will soon be sticking with 12G for a while yet. Too much complexity and additional costs with 2110, even with some of the Blackmagic stuff, to try and simplify it. Yeah, that's kind of my thinking as well. I mean, the 12 gig SDI stuff works, and they're not adding any major new capabilities with this stuff, at least not right now. So sticking with 12G SDI sounds like it's going to be ideal for a lot of people, and that's certainly going to be my plan as well. All right. When 2110 to SDI converter can help with use bandwidth to move signals around quickly and simplify, and then edge to convert to SDI. So yeah, that's kind of what they want you to do, is start making the move. So you do 2110 on devices that actually support it, and then continue to use SDI on your legacy devices, and then make the migration as you're upgrading new gear. So yeah, let's see what else we got. I was hoping for more integration between 2110 IP products and traditional SDI HDMI workflows. If only those new ATEM switchers had a mix of SDI, HDMI, and fiber connections. Yeah, but I think they're really trying to get people to commit. You know, you can certainly take an existing SDI setup and make it work with the new stuff using the converters, and it doesn't look like you're paying a major penalty price-wise for doing that. And the converter there, what was that pricing on that guy? So SDI expander, $29.95. That's for 8 channels and 8 inputs and 8 outputs. So that's not terrible. So you get the switcher for $8,000. Add that SDI expander for $3,000. For $11,000 or thereabouts, that's giving you a setup that's going to work for a lot of people, 8 ins and 8 outs. And then if for each additional 8 ins and 8 outs that you want to add, you'd add additional one of those SDI expanders, and then that will bridge you, at least for the time being. So, but again, I don't think I'm going to be making that move. The main reason for that is the additional latency that tends to happen with 2110. Let's see, there is the 2110 SDI breakout. That's the one we're talking about. Doesn't do HDMI, but now in 2110 is a bit more of your build your own kit. That is true. So the 2110 is really, because it's more flexible, they are more reliant on you building out with the individual pieces that you need in order to put your particular setup together. Let's see. Yeah, I saw the SDI breakout begin, and just SDI, just an add-on. Instead of being integrated in the switcher itself, yeah. But that's kind of the point of 2110. So you bring the components in that you need, and you don't try to make everything serve every purpose and serve every possible need. So looks like that's kind of it for the 2110 discussions on out in the chat. So, okay, all right. So let's move on to the next thing that they've talked about, and that's a brand new HyperDeck recorder. So this is a HyperDeck ISO. Let me find it on their website here. So products, go away, and then disc recorders, and go back to this view here. So there's the traditional HyperDecks. Here is the brand new HyperDeck ISO recorder 100G. So this is basically an 8-channel video recorder. It uses ST2110. So it records 8 video feeds simultaneously. Now, one of the interesting things about this compared to the more traditional HyperDecks, it has no internal storage and no media bays whatsoever. So it's more or less an encoder than it is. It's more encoder than it is an actual recorder. So in order to actually use this, you have to add on storage, and that's what this unit below here is. So this uses the Blackmagic Media Dock modules, and they also allow you to record over the network to other devices like some of their more traditional cloud products as well. So essentially what this device does is it pulls in video from your 2110 network up to 8 channels and allows you to record it to another device on the network, but again, without any sort of local storage whatsoever. I thought that was a little odd. I thought they would have at least had some internal SSD storage or something like that, but that's not the approach that they're taking. But you're able to get recording of 8 devices in one single unit, two rack units high, and again, if you need SDI, then you add the converter. If you are coming from 10 gig devices, you add this 10 IP video device. And then if you've got more than 8 sources, then you would add the 100 gig Ethernet switch. In terms of actual storage, they have this brand new Blackmagic Cloud Store Ultra, which comes in 24 and 48 terabyte variants, and then they have the Media Dock Ultra, so you're able to record to any of these devices. Your Media Dock here is your external storage, and then the Cloud Store is your internal storage. So for most productions, if you had both, you would record to your internal storage and then offload into your media storage as well. You can also, of course, because this is just an Ethernet network, you can actually just copy files directly over the network as well. So you can do all your internal storage using the Cloud Store Ultra, and then your computer connects to that device, and you literally just copy the files to your computer. So, which presents an interesting challenge for some people, particularly with Macs, because Macs don't come with 100 gigabit Ethernet connections, and the only interface that even comes close is Thunderbolt, but it doesn't even get that fast. So I don't know what the solution for that's going to be, especially because Apple has now discontinued the Mac Pro, which is going to be about the only way that you can really get 100 gigabit Ethernet in and out of a Mac at this point. Of course, PCs that have PCI slots, you can get 100 gig adapters all day, no problem. They aren't even that expensive. And that, of course, gives you easy access to copying files and that kind of thing over the network. Although that does not enable video in and out of your computer, that requires another product, which I'll save save that discussion for another time. But anyway, so the HyperDeck ISO recorder, it's a HyperDeck ISO recorder 100G is their brand new recorder product. Record up to 8 channels simultaneously. I presume that probably means recording to all channels simultaneously. So like you're either recording all or playing back all. It's probably not a mix and match. We don't know that yet for sure. So that means if you need to do playback and recording simultaneously, you would need at least 2 of these devices and or adapting another device using an SDI conversion. So anyway, the fact that it's recording 8 channels simultaneously, that's a feature that a lot of us have been asking for a long time, so we don't have to have multiple HyperDeck units. Like in my trailer, I think it's 11 different HyperDecks that are in there. And the reason for so many is like when I need to record multiple sources simultaneously, having a single unit that's able to do quite a few of them does make a lot of sense for a lot of different situations, like isolated camera feeds or multiple different simultaneous outputs for multiple MEs or with or without graphics, that kind of thing. So a lot of different reasons that you might want to have the ability to record multiple channels simultaneously. We also don't know if it can mix and match video formats. So if you've got one camera that's in 4K and another camera that's in HD, whether it can actually handle that or not. But these are things that we will have to see, and certainly some questions I'm going to be asking while I'm at NAB. I do have an appointment to meet with Blackmagic, and I will be asking them some questions about all this stuff, of course, and be shooting that video. And if all goes well, I'll have that posted on my channel sometime next week. So I'll be sure to do some follow-up on that. Now, along those lines, if you guys have some things that you want me to ask them, please let me know. You can post it in the chat here, but most likely if you want me to remember, the best thing to do is going to be to use the contact form on my website. So you can go djp.li/contact in order to send me an email. And then I will compile the list of questions that people have, and then have, within the allotted time that I have to meet with Blackmagic, I will see how many of those I can certainly fit in. Okay. All right. So pricing and availability on this new HyperDeck, it is $4,995 available July. Again, normal caveat supply. And then the Cloud Store Ultra, which is the single rack storage device right here, this one right here. So this guy is going to be available in two different variants, 24 and 48 terabytes. The 24 terabyte variant is going to be $88.35, available July, and the 48 terabyte is $15,695, and also available in July. Knock on wood. The Ultra Dock, Media Dock Ultra, this unit is going to be $29.95 and available in July. Of course, that does not include any media. Media on these things is pretty expensive, so unless you have a specific need for this, there's probably better ways to accomplish the same thing. So one thing we do not know, not right now anyway, is if there's an easy way to have the HyperDeck record to the storage on a computer or a NAS device. That's again something that I'm going to want to try and ask them while I'm there at NAB. Alrighty, so let me jump into the comments and see if anybody is saying anything about these devices. Again, if you guys have thoughts on this, please pipe up and share. So let's talk about cameras. Oh, I did see one question about whether Blackmagic is going to be moving away from SDI and do 2110 exclusive. I don't see that. 2110 still doesn't make a lot of sense for smaller productions, and Blackmagic has kind of built their whole business on smaller productions and affordable equipment, and this stuff is very much higher end than what their typical live production customer has been in the past. So I'm not really seeing any comments about the HyperDeck. I could be missing it, but yeah, not seeing much there. So anyway, this is the HyperDeck is certainly an interesting product, being able to record 8 channels simultaneously. Again, something we've been asking for a long time. I thought that we would probably be seeing an SDI version before we saw a 2110 version, but there it is. So for the converter, so you can get the HyperDeck for basically $5,000. You get their converter, SDI expander for converter for $3,000, and then you need some kind of storage. We'll assume that somebody, just for sake of discussion, we'll say somebody is going to get the Cloud Store Ultra, which is 24 terabytes. So you're talking about like basically $9,000. So between those three, you're $20,000, nearly $20,000 to record 8 channels of video. So we'll see. That's a fair amount. So certainly more expensive than doing it in a more traditional route. So for anybody who is looking for multi-channel recording, the HyperDeck Extreme, their more traditional product, the 8K version of it, let's see if I can find it here on their website. Yeah, there we go. So let me show this. This guy right here, HyperDeck Extreme 8K. This will actually record, with the firmware update that came out last year, I'm pretty sure it's out, allows you to record 4 channels simultaneously. So if you need multi-channel recording on a single device, that is an existing solution that Blackmagic has, and of course that uses SDI in order to accomplish that. So, okay, let's see what else. So next thing they announced was going to be, we'll see if I can find this one. This is the UpDownCross. So I assume that's going to probably be under broadcast converters. We'll see for sure. IP. So these are legacy products. They've had these two for a while, and these as well. And that one. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So UpDownCross 100G. So this is a new rack-mounted video standards converter. So this converts between all sorts of different video formats to all sorts of other video formats, and this does 8 conversions simultaneously. So if you got HD footage and you need to convert it to Ultra HD or standard def footage and you need to convert it to HD, that's exactly what this does. But again, it's using 2110, so which kind of interesting because I don't know that a ton of people need to do those conversions, especially with the ATEM switcher that they have is capable of doing those conversions internally. But what I'll get to their future plans here in a little bit, but basically this is it's a rack mount converter that allows you to convert from one video format to another, anywhere from standard def all the way up to Ultra HD in all the various frame rates that they support, from 24 all the way up through 30 frames per second for now. And I'll get into what that means here a little bit later in the video as we talk about their future plans. So anyway, so this is a rack mount converter to single rack mount space, one U. It converts all these different formats. So they have a standalone image of just that. That's what I'm looking for here. These are their more traditional products that they've had for a while, introduced last year in most cases. Monitoring. I must have missed the standalone image of just the converter. Yeah. Anyway, so it's a one rack unit. It has their new design language, again, the front to back airflow for better cooling, and supports all your video formats, SD through Ultra HD at 24 to 120, or sorry, to 60 frames per second. Anyway, okay, all right. The pricing on that one is $24.35 and it'll be available in July. Now, something that's very interesting is their camera lineup has not traditionally supported 2110 very well, so they've made some changes with that. So they have announced it's Ursa Cine series. They have a software update that's going to be available for this one, available soon. They didn't give an exact date on that, but the Ursa Cine 12K LF meaning large format, for capturing footage and then having it be 2110. So the camera itself does have a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection built right into it. Let's see if we can find some images on some of this stuff. Yeah, that's another announcement right there. They actually have a new version of this camera that supports the 100 gig Ethernet as well. But their existing camera is getting a firmware update to allow it to be used with 2110 workflows. It's just a software update. It's going to add the ability to do lookup table color conversion, LUTs. And they're coming out with a B4 mount for this camera, and then a B4 adapter cable for controlling the lenses, and then they're adding a cinema viewfinder. Let's see if they show any of that stuff here. This existing product page is really focused more on the cinema style workflow that this camera was originally intended for. There we go. So there's the new viewfinder. It basically turns, there you go. So that's the new setup. So this turns this Ursa Cine live camera, or Ursa Cine camera into a live camera with most of the same capabilities that Blackmagic has had on their other cameras, particularly like the Ursa Broadcast in the past. So this is going to give you a very cinema-like image because it is a large sensor. This is a full frame size sensor, so it's 36 by 24 millimeters. So far, far larger than you traditionally get with broadcast. And broadcast is normally a 2/3, most commonly a 2/3 inch sensor. So far, far, far smaller, which then is going to give you the ability to work in lower light situations. It's going to give you the ability to have more control over your depth of field and just produce that kind of softer, more cinema-like image if that's what you're looking for your live productions. With this firmware update, this really turns this into a proper broadcast-style camera for use within a 2110 ecosystem, particularly with Blackmagic. So pretty interesting there. The upgrades to make this happen, the hardware upgrades that are needed to make this happen, the B4 mount is going to be $495. Let's see if I can find pictures of these things. $495 and available in June. And then the cable adapter for controlling the lens is going to be $95 available in June. And then the new viewfinder, 7-inch screen, it's going to be $1495 also available in June. So there you go. There's that 10 gigabit Ethernet connection I mentioned there. And a lot of information on this page. Most of it focused on camera control. There you go. There you go. So there's Studio Bridge that we talked about for bringing in 10 gig. And then there's a larger Studio Bridge, 100 gig for adapting more cameras. Sorry, this is for combining two cameras into a single connection. So you're able to combine video from two separate cameras over one single fiber connection. That's what this product is for. I'll cover that here in a moment. All right, see if they've got the adapters here on the screen. Ursa Cine mount B4. Yep, that's the one they just announced. And they're showing $719 on here. I'm guessing these are prices that are going to be projected based on what they're going to see with tariffs and whatnot here in the U.S. There's that Cinematic adapter cable, and then the viewfinder. That's going to be. Is that further up? Did I miss it? It's Pixis monitor. There you go. Yeah, so this one. The Ursa Cine Studio Viewfinder is $16.95 here. The announced price was $14.95. So, yeah, they are including tariffs, projected tariffs in these prices. So, anyway, yeah, that would turn this camera into a pretty good camera for broadcast work. It also works with their zoom and focus demands, so you have control over your lens with your hands on a proper studio tripod. And anyway, so yeah, it looks like that could be pretty cool. 12K sensor, but it's only going to output Ultra HD, so you're throwing a lot of that information away. You can also always record in camera and then use that, edit that in post, but in terms of live switching, you're getting the 4K signal coming out of the camera. So anyway, so that software update to add those additional features is going to be free and it's going to be available soon. That's all we know on that. Okay. Alrighty, so I did see a fair number of people talking about that. So let me jump back into the chat here, see what people have to say. Yeah, Ursa Cine 12K with B4 mount would be a replacement for Ursa Broadcast. I don't know if it's a replacement, but it certainly is kind of a product in the same, with a lot of the same functionality. The big difference being the sensor size. You know, the Ursa Broadcast has that smaller 2/3 inch sensor, whereas the Cine 12K is your full frame, much larger. Let's see what else we got here. Ursa Cine 4K is slow-mo camera. Okay, we'll get to that here in a little bit. Someone commenting about NDI. Oh, yeah, I mentioned the announcement. Any new converters or anything NDI? No, I don't think Blackmagic ever embrace NDI. The licensing costs for NDI are really high, and Blackmagic likes to keep their product pricing low. I know from talking to the people who have implemented NDI that it's actually quite expensive to add to a camera. So I'm sure that's the main reason. But also, the company that technically owns the NDI stuff now, VizRT, is a bit of a competitor to Blackmagic, so they'd have to partner with one of their competitors in order to implement it. So kind of going back to the 2110 discussion, SDI fiber seems too much easier and cost-effective to use, and that's generally going to be true. So, if you're looking for a simple setup, the 2110 is probably not going to be the way to go for you. But on the flip side, switching video via network switch seems nice. Yeah. So, if you guys have comments on any of this stuff, please jump into the chat and let me know. Compare 2110 to SRT. Very, very different things. SRT is designed to do compressed video over slower links, whereas 2110 is designed to do video over a fast local network. It's not that you can't do either of those in either situation, but that's sort of kind of what they're designed for. SRT is going to have more latency just because of the encoding and the kind of the back and forth nature of the protocol, whereas 2110 is designed to keep latency pretty low. It's not zero like you can get with SDI, or near zero. So yeah, 100G IP10 is not required for 2160p. So 2160p, if you want to do 2160p over 2110, and you're in the Blackmagic ecosystem, they have a way of throwing away some unnecessary and redundant data and applying light compression to a video signal in order to make it fit in a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection. Normally 2160p is 12 gigabits for that data stream. So they've tweaked the way the video is sent over a network ever so slightly, but it is not compatible with other manufacturers' implementations of 2110. And I believe that also applies to 21p50 as well. I've read that as well, because 2150p is also a 12 gig signal. That would be a little bit easier to get under the 10 gig because there's less data. But yeah, at 10 gig that's still needed. You can't fit the uncompressed signal down the pipe. That's what the Blackmagic codec is all about, allowing you to do that. Although with its 100 gig connections, they appear to be moving back to sending mostly uncompressed, fully compatible 2110 video. They didn't say anything about that in the announcement, so we don't know that for sure, but several of the devices that they have in the ecosystem do only have 10 gig connections, and so they will obviously have to support their own codec in order to make that work. But as to whether the devices that have the 100 gig are doing the full 2110 video or not, I don't know. And maybe it's a configurable option, because if they didn't do that, then they would break compatibility with some of their other products. So, yeah. Nothing for small live projects. Yeah, that's kind of true. And most of the stuff they did today is not really applicable to smaller productions. Blackmagic is nuts. Too much 2110 slop. We're not NAP. We don't need 2110. Where's the Ursa Broadcast G3? This camera needs an urgent update. There are a lot of products in Blackmagic's lineup that are a little bit long in the tooth and need to be updated. That's just one of many. The one that I'm still waiting for an update on is their rack mount scope monitors. Those things are now over 10 years old, and the resolution is poor and the video quality is poor. Yeah. Aaron saying this video made me so angry. Yeah, so glad Blackmagic is working at a $100,000 switcher with dozens of 10G fiber ports. Maybe when they have some downtime, they can fix the clock inside the 1650 SDI Extreme SDI ISO. Yeah, so I know what he's referring to there. There is a time code issue that it's in the SDI Extreme ISO switcher that's still not fixed. And that's kind of true of a lot of their products. So like you get into edge cases and there are bugs that have not been addressed. Or release baseband video I/O card with PCIe standard from this decade. Yeah, most of their PCI cards are still using older versions of PCIe. So yeah, all this 2110 is going to keep network engineers busy. 2110 is not bad. People just don't understand that in order to get a new platform, you have to develop the entire ecosystem. That is true. It's hard to just dip your toe into one of these platforms and assume that it's going to work. Yeah. Once the ecosystem has got a solid footprint foundation, they can work to ubiquitize it for medium and small productions, but you have to start large. That's very different than what the approach that Blackmagic has taken in the past. They've, for the most part, gone with the smaller products and then introduced higher end ones later, with a few exceptions. But they really got their start providing tools for people who don't have the huge budget of big broadcast or media companies. So, yeah. We're hitting the limits of SDI. 2110 offers new exciting foundation to work on. Lots of cool stuff you can do. That is true, but fundamentally, the stuff that we got works. So we don't need to be in a hurry to replace it. 2110 only makes sense at a large scale when you run out of 3G routers. How many of us deal with this huge infrastructure? I tell you, nobody. Well, it's not nobody, but it is few. And there are not that many people that need huge infrastructure. It's mostly like broadcasters, legacy broadcasters, which is funny because like they have no money. So we'll see if anything actually happens on that end. 2110 is for MCR traffic, large OB trucks, and this is a lot of money. Of course, nobody is spending so much money on Blackmagic. This calls for Grass Valley, Sony, Ross. That's what they're trying to change. They're trying to break into those markets. I think Blackmagic is at least at a point where their reputation is a little bit better than it used to be, to the point where some of the people who would only go with your Grass Valley, Sony, Ross, those sort of legacy companies, are considering them now. And 2110 is a way to make themselves more viable. Like SDI only used to be for big productions too. That is true to some degree. It's been a while since that's been true, but yes. I do understand that Blackmagic's target is not large corporations but small users like us on a budget, which one of the reasons that makes 2110 a little bit odd for them to be pressing it so hard. Yeah, they should stick to compressed IP video. 2110 is for the big boys. And here we go. So I purchased 3 2110 devices, 33% DOA, and those were $600 devices. How do they expect us to trust them to make all this increasingly complex stuff and have it work properly? In the long run, it seems like Blackmagic does seem to get their stuff working the way that it should, but it can take a little while, especially with entirely new platforms. So the 2110 converters, when they first came out, they were problematic. I bought a couple of them and did some testing with them, and then very quickly realized that they were not ready for me to be using in a situation where I've got a client paying me to do a production. So I didn't keep them. I bought them knowing I wasn't going to keep them, but I at least wanted to play with them. So yeah. Alrighty. Okay, so here's a good question. Would you please explain this so others can understand why you have to start with large scale in order to scale down? I think in this case, it's sort of the nature of 2110 itself. 2110 is just not needed by anybody who's doing small productions. The more traditional SDI or even HDMI workflow works just fine. And the people who need 2110 are going to be building out big systems. So if Blackmagic was to come in and start with like an ATEM mini version of a 2110 switcher, nobody would buy it. Nobody would be interested in that. So that's why they're doing the bigger stuff first, because anybody who needs 2110 is not going to be looking at the smaller scale stuff that the Blackmagic has produced in the past. So anyway, I mean, eventually 2110 is probably going to become kind of the standard way that we interact with our video products eventually. But that said, SDI works really well, especially once you incorporate fiber into a given workflow, because it takes care of a lot of the distance limitations and things like that you get with an SDI copper cable. So, I mean, SDI is not going away overnight, but 2110 does have some real advantages in the way that signals are routed and some of the other capabilities. Like, for example, I have an entire video on 2110 here on their channel. If you haven't seen that, you should probably go watch it. But the audio and video are actually sent separately, and so if you have, we can talk about this a little bit later, but if you want to be doing mixing of your audio sources that are coming from video sources like cameras or whatever, you don't have to have an entire device that converts from a video stream to extract just the audio stream. So each one of those streams is called an essence, and if you're doing an audio mixer or an audio recorder or whatever, and you just want audio, you can just subscribe to the audio stream and not even do anything with the video whatsoever. In fact, your network is set up such that you won't even receive the video on your network connection. So it gives you some real flexibility there, but also gives you the ability to have multiple different simultaneous streams, both audio and video. So, if you're doing, say for example, multi-language content, and you have something like the Olympics. I mean, that's obviously huge scale, but you can have your camera feeds coming in, and then you can have audio feeds from your venue wherever things are happening, and then somebody along the path embeds your graphics, and you do your graphics in different languages. So you got one for English, one for Spanish, one for French, one for Chinese, one for Russian, whatever, right? And those would be different video streams, but they're all part of the same group of video. And then you're going to do the spoken language on top of that as well. So you have one basically pipe of all of these different streams, essences that have all the different localized content. Or you could do multi-camera angles or whatever. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in that way that you don't necessarily get with, let's say, an SDI thing. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that your Ethernet connection is not bound to a specific speed. So you can scale up, scale down, whatever you need for whatever you happen to be doing. So, and in terms of routing, one source can be received by many devices without having to go through a so-called splitter or a router. So, one camera can be going to your recorder, it can be going to your switcher, it can be going to a capture stream on your computer, however you want, all at the same time without having to have a device that specifically splits that up like you traditionally do with SDI and HDMI or whatever else. So, anyway, so there are some real advantages there, but because of the complex technology that's involved in doing some of this stuff, today it's expensive, particularly the network switching stuff. You know what? I was shocked to see this network switch that they came out with being available for under $3,000. It's $2,295 for a switch that's able to handle basically 64 simultaneous video streams in and out. So, yeah, kind of a long way to answer the question, but they'll only get customers with 2110 today, for the most part, if they're doing the higher end stuff. If they were to just do a switcher and a camera and that was it, nobody would buy it. And there's not a lot of need for that at the lower end just yet. So, yeah. Okay. What else here? Okay, a lot of the 2110 stuff seems really cool from a spec sheet viewpoint, but in reality seems a little half-baked. Almost as proof of concept line, a potential V2 could actually be useful. That is true to some degree. We're really not seeing them take advantage of all the capabilities of 2110. But get something out the door and get it working and get it tested in the field and get people using it and becoming familiar with it. And you can add new capabilities on with firmware later. So Blackmagic is known for that. Traditionally over the years, they have very often added new capabilities to products long after they ship, because they used FPGAs and programmable firmware and some of this other stuff where they're actually able to change the functionality of the hardware remotely. So, yeah. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next thing here because we've kind of spent a lot of time on that. All right, so the next product that they actually announced, let me clear off the graphic or the chat here. They announced new rack panels for controlling ATEM switchers. So I'm going to go to that. So when we scroll down here, we've got the new switchers. We have these 2 new panels. These are interesting. These are not switchers. These are not ATEM switchers. There's no actual video processing hardware in these things. They are effectively just remote controls to allow you to select sources and initiate transitions in kind of a limited way. I mean, it's not the same thing as like these big advanced panels that they have, but at least it gives you some local control. So if you're building an equipment rack that has one of the new switchers in it, and you want to be able to just very quickly test signals, make sure everything's working the way that you want it to, or as a backup in case something else goes down, you can always do your switching with these. They literally are just control panels. And you can see one right there. From the outside, they look just like the Constellation switchers. They're more traditional. They're more legacy switchers. Let's see. They have separate images for these. Let's see if they have. Anyway, so the back on them. Yeah, there you go. The back on these things is really. They have pictures, looks like maybe not. Yeah, the back on them is really just a couple of Ethernet connections and then a couple of SDI video outputs and an HDMI output. So you're remotely controlling the switcher for basic features, and then it gives you a video output so you can monitor a particular video source. These include monitors so you can see what source you have selected, so that gives you a way to do that. So they have 2 different versions of it. They have the 20 input, or 20 button, I should say, because it's not really an input, and then they have a 40 button version of it. So the 20 button version is going to be priced at $9.95, available July, and the 40 button input is going to be $15.95, also available July. Again, normal caveats on pricing and availability. So. But that is kind of where we get into some of the more interesting things that they had to say. So Grant sort of peeled back the curtain a little bit more than he's ever done in the past, talking about sort of the future direction of where they're moving, where they're heading with some of their products. I don't really recall them doing that too much in the past, other than like announcing a handful of products a few months ahead of them really being ready for shipping. But I don't really recall them ever having basically said, this is where we're going, this is what we're going to be doing. So, but they talked about what having 2110 video is going to allow them to do in the future that they've not been able to do with an SDI type of workflow. And probably the biggest one of those things is high frame rate. So basically what that means is starting to have devices which can produce video at frame rates above 60 frames per second, or consume video at more than 50 frames per second. Of course, your classic example of that is going to be sporting events where you have slow motion replay and that kind of thing. So that's kind of where they want to be headed with a lot of this stuff. And so the camera that they're talking about, a new camera that's the Ursa Cine 12K LF 100, 100 meaning 100 gigabytes, or sorry, a gigabit per second. It's very similar to the 10 gig version, but it also allows you to shoot up to 440 frames per second, and then send that video over your fiber connection to your video production hardware. And from there, you would probably you'd be most likely recording it on a HyperDeck, and then you'd use that for your slow motion instant replay by bringing that footage into DaVinci Resolve and using the slow motion replay features that it has. But using their converter product, their UpDownCross converter product, you'd be able to convert that high frame rate footage to a lower frame rate. So the example that they showed was doing a 200 frame per second shot of a hockey game. And they can use the UpDownCross to convert that 200 frames down to 50 frames per second for going into the ATEM switcher. And we didn't really talk about the possibility of having an ATEM operate at more than 60 frames per second, but in theory that could be possible. So all of a sudden you're switching in 100 frames per second or 120 frames per second, and whatever. Of course, that's pure speculation, but that's a potential workflow that somebody could actually have using the new 2110 stuff that wasn't really possible easily using SDI. So so they're basically saying this is the way we're going. The products to do this or the software updates to do this are already in the works and should be available before too long. You need a firmware update for the HyperDeck, firmware update for a camera, firmware update for the UpDownCross, the brand new one, in order to make all this stuff work. But that is indeed where they're headed. So they're clearly trying to take aim at a higher end broadcast than what they've traditionally done in the past. Being able to do high frame rate instant replay is something that's really been only accessible to big companies with millions and millions of dollars to throw at it. So, and typically done with special cameras too. So very often if you do a true high speed capture and instant replay with slow motion, those cameras are generally shooting just for that particular purpose, with some exceptions. But for the most part, when you're seeing a slow motion instant replay, like ESPN broadcast, they are shooting cameras specifically for the purpose of doing that slow motion instant replay. And this workflow allows you to use the same camera to capture your high frame rate and your more traditional frame rate at the same time. So as part of that, they announced this new Ursa Cine 12K LF camera, expecting to be available in June. Let's see if I can find it here. Go to products, professional cameras, Ursa Cine. All right, so yeah, right here. So it looks very much like the more traditional 12K LF, but it has a 100 gigabit connection for up to 440 frames per second. And in theory, having a 100 gigabit connection could also allow them to do higher resolution. So, granted, made no mention of it, but all of a sudden your camera is shooting not in 4K, but in 12K, and all 12K of that is going to your recorder, being put on your storage, and then you could be doing region of interest where you crop into a video. And think of that even for like instant replay. So you're able to crop in without losing any quality, or you're still seeing a 4K worth of detail in your image. So that's something that a 2110 style workflow would allow you to do that would not be possible with SDI. So, yeah. But a new camera for that. And then they also announced a new camera for immersive content, which, let's be honest, is mostly for people who are wearing like the VR glasses. Probably the most well-known version of that is the Apple Vision Pro. Blackmagic has had this immersive camera available for a little while now for shooting content specifically for those. But what they're doing is they're introducing a new 100 gigabit version of that camera as well that uses 2110. In particular, because this does shoot high resolution, so you can see this 8K by 8K. It's a square frame, up to 90 frames per second, and that requires a lot of additional bandwidth and a lot of additional processing that has not been available with the stuff that we've used in the past. So, yeah, this new camera here, the Ursa Cine 12K LF 100G. The pricing on that is going to be $89.95, available in June. And then, along with that, if you need to combine two cameras over a single fiber connection, that's where they announced the Blackmagic Studio Bridge 100G, which allows you to connect two cameras using the fiber connection, and then has a single fiber output to get that back to your switch, your ATEM, your HyperDeck, whatever you want to consume that video. And that product is going to be $24.95, available in July. So, the pricing on the Cine Ursa Immersive 100G, this guy, I think I probably wrote that down wrong, so that number doesn't look right, so I'm not even going to bother to quote it. $26,495. Yeah, that seems too much because the immersive camera is considerably less than that. But I guess that makes sense though with the high resolution, high frame rate. So anyway, that kind of rounds it up for new hardware for anybody who is in the live production world. Kind of let you know what's going on there. There was one additional ATEM product announced. It's a huge new ATEM switcher that is designed specifically for immersive use. So, being able to do this VR type stuff in a live environment. So you have multiple of these immersive cameras feeding into this new ATEM switcher. It's a switcher that has 64 immersive inputs, 16 outputs. Requires 32 QSFP modules plus redundant ones, so 64 100 gig connections on it. Doesn't record it. It encodes into ProRes, which is what Apple uses for doing their immersive content. Has quad power supplies instead of just dual power supplies. I forgot to mention that. Like pretty much all these products that they announced today have dual power supplies, so that if one power supply dies or one power source goes out, you're able to keep up and running. Let's see. They are providing, or they plan to provide a firmware update to allow this new ATEM is called the Solaris i64, I for immersive, 64 for the number of inputs. But they plan to have a firmware update available for that to allow up to 200 Ultra HD inputs. So it's a massive unit. I think 12 rack spaces. He didn't actually say, but it's going to be expensive. So $110,000 for this switcher, and they're also planning a 32 input version of it, so half size. And they said the pricing on that's going to be about $50,000. So very specialized products. Certainly not anything that anybody who watches this channel is ever going to be buying and using, but. Very clear that Blackmagic is really trying to move very heavily into higher end productions. They're trying to move into facilities where 2110 is kind of the norm, the way that they happen to do things, and they're really doubling down on this immersive content as well, which is interesting because I didn't really know that was getting any traction, to be honest. But they seem to be one of the few people that are producing, or one of the few companies that are producing cameras and whatnot in order to produce that VR type content, immersive content. So yeah, and then most of the rest of the video was about changes with DaVinci Resolve and related products. I know I took more notes than what I'm seeing right here. My pages have gotten very badly out of order. I'm not a Resolve user much myself. I use it to do some light coloring here and there, but I don't use it to edit, and I don't do any advanced processing on it. So there was a couple things about it that I thought was interesting. So one of the things they just barely glanced across was HTML graphics import into Resolve, which I've never covered on the channel here, but it's a way of doing animated graphics using HTML style, web page style technologies. And there's some interesting things going on there. But I thought that was rather interesting that they were actually going to be supporting that natively in Resolve. So people are doing graphics in that way. Then you could actually import those right into your Resolve timeline. But some really cool stuff with AI that's happening with Resolve. Again, I don't want to go into a lot of detail with this, but an AI-based intelligent search, so you can search for things based on content, color schemes, people's faces, that kind of thing. An AI speech generator, which they include four different voices, but actually allows you to sample someone's voice and then produce content in that voice using text to speech. So, if I needed to replace one of my own voiceovers in one of my videos, I wouldn't have to necessarily record that audio. I'd basically say, take this text and render it in my voice. So that feature is going to be natively in Resolve version 21. AI Cinefocus, which allows you to change the focus points and depth of field and things like that in post-production using AI. Beauty and face effects, so blemish removal, transforming people's ages, apparent ages, things like that. Face reshaper, an ultra sharpen, emotion remover, motion deblur. Another big one was the new one's going to allow you to do photo editing right in Resolve, so you get all the same tools for recoloring and other edits with your video footage, but now with photos. And that sort of treats a group of photos like a video timeline, which is kind of cool. Better text generators, better handling of audio. But the other thing that I thought was actually pretty interesting here was the announcement of a brand new software product, Fairlight Live, which is basically a software-based audio mixer. So rather than taking the approach of doing a piece of hardware to do your audio processing, they do it using the computer and the CPU and maybe even GPU that you have available there. So they're doubling down on doing more with audio in terms of the live production space. I'm kind of anxious to see what that means in terms of latency, because traditionally software-based mixers that run on a computer have more latency than most audio people are comfortable with, particularly if you have situations where you have people, performers who are wearing in-ear monitors. That latency going through a computer is extremely distracting for a performer that's wearing IEMs. So I hope they've solved that problem. Otherwise, this product might be dead in the water for a lot of those types of situations. I know if it has that issue, I would not be able to use it for the productions that I do. But basically, it's a full fat audio mixer that's rendered in software, and they introduced some panels. Let's see if I can find it here. Hardware panels for controlling the switcher. There we go. All right, so go back to computer view here. So Fairlight Live. Okay. Yeah, so this new software is actually free. They're not charging anything for it. And an interesting thing from a point of view of those of us who work in video production is they're going to be using the Fairlight Live software to, or at least enable, to control the audio mixing that's happening inside of certain models of ATEM switcher. So that's always been one of the big issues with doing audio on the ATEMs is it's done through an awkward software interface for the most part. I mean, there's a couple of hardware solutions that'll give you some control over that, but I actually come out of the audio world. I was doing audio long before I was doing video, and having dedicated controls for doing audio is almost a must in a live environment. And so I think Blackmagic is finally recognizing that they needed to address that, and so they've created this Fairlight Live software integrating with ATEM switchers, and then they have these hardware panels that are used to control the Fairlight Live software. So they've got this 10 fader version, a 20 fader version, and a 40 fader version. Each of these has a nice big screen. It's a touch screen, so you're able to manipulate things right there on the screen. So it's a little bit quicker than having to do things using a computer style interface, but ultimately still not quite as fast as having real proper hardware for controlling a lot of that stuff. So the jury's still out on this one for me, whether it's actually really going to be useful or not for people who would do live production. Having been and worked with a lot of audio guys, I suspect there's going to be a lot of hesitation to try and embrace this. But we'll see. It seems like it's pretty well done, and very well organized. Most of the capabilities that somebody who's doing live audio would actually need. The way that they organize tracks and build submixes and things like that looks pretty clean, looks pretty slick. From an appearance point of view, it actually looks really nice, really nicely done. But again, I have that concern that the latency and whatnot on this is not going to be acceptable for a lot of situations. Anybody who's doing live audio knows that you have to have the capability of doing feeds back to performers. Not just for music performances, but even for spoken performances. It's not uncommon for speakers to wear IEMs to hear themselves and get feedback from a producer or whatever. And more than a couple of milliseconds of delay on that just kills you. It messes with your head, and it makes it really hard to be able to do your performance, do your presentation, whatever. So anyway, so I will, because it's free, I'll probably try it out and just kind of see what it takes to get a proper mix done. And I assume the audio quality is going to be fine on it, and we're kind of at a point now where that's pretty universally good across the board. So yeah. Okay, let's kind of take a look at some of the questions and comments on the chat and see. Let's see. Can you record to an SDI Extreme to replace your HyperDeck, or do you need more pass-throughs? In my situation, I need the pass-throughs. So, yeah. And I already have the HyperDecks. In a lot of cases, I'm using the older HyperDeck Studio Mini because they sell for next to nothing online, and they're still extremely capable devices. So, yeah. You must be recording 4K in your HyperDecks. Yeah, sometimes. Yep. Okay. How's it supposed to work with the B4 2/3 adapter to a full-frame sensor, cinema sensor? I think they're going to require you to use B4 lenses that are designed for the full-frame sensor. They do exist. They're far less common than the 2/3 inch lenses, but they do exist. I can't imagine that they would be trying to blow up a tiny 2/3 inch image up to a full frame. It would just be horrible if they were doing that. So I'm assuming that they're going to be expecting you to use lenses that are made for the larger. Either that or they're cropping the sensor, which would also be pretty horrendous. And that's a huge waste of that sensor. So must do insane magnification to cover the large sensor with a huge loss of light, definition, etc. I don't know. Yeah, I doubt that they're doing that. It may be a combination of using lenses that are designed for sensors larger than 2/3 inch and cropping at the same time, but trying to crop in at to a 2/3, it would be horrendous. So broadcast GT sensor is not 2/3; it's somewhere around Super 35. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Alrighty. Now you can't add NDI to anything with the recent NDI license change, which kind of not related to what we're talking about, but that's a huge potential issue for VizRT with the NDI stuff. All right. Clear Life Live, our new broadcast trailer with NAB in the Allied broadcast booth next to Sony. Come by and say hi. I'll be there Sunday through Wednesday. Okay, yeah, I'll be sure and make a point to do that. So I'll love to see anybody's trailers. So, okay, most of 100G products seem to carry 8 channels, so it should use standard 2110 encoding. We don't know. We don't know if they're going to do that or not. Again, that's something I'm going to try and find out. If they, I think with all their stuff, they've been able to accept a standard 2110, 2060p, 50 or 60 signal. It's just that because most of the devices have 10 gig, most of their older devices have 10 gig connections, they've had to use their own codec to send those signals. But those same devices also can only receive 10 gig. So if I was going to guess, I would say they probably have it as a configurable option. But again, I will find out and so see what they're doing. I like 2010 conceptually, but most of the 10G, 100G network equipment seems just not particularly affordable. That is generally true, but that's sort of why I was so surprised by the $2,400 roughly price of their new switch. And then it goes on, especially if you want a PTP, Precision Time Protocol. That has been the big linchpin with a lot of these switches that are kind of affordable, is they don't support Precision Time Protocol properly. Precision Time Protocol is called precision because it is extremely precise in its timing, and in order for that to work, the network switches that you have have to actually modify those timestamps in those packets as they pass through. So you've got a PTP time source somewhere on your network, and it sends out a packet that says this is the current time. When it passes through the switch says, I received it at this time. I'm going to change the time in the packet before sending it on because the timing is that precise. And a switch has to explicitly support that. That's been the one thing that's been lacking for most of the equipment that we've tried to use with a lot of the 2110, less expensive 2110 equipment that's out there. And I'm going to assume that these new Blackmagic switches support it because you really essentially have to. So, all right, the customer base that Blackmagic was built on is going to be priced out of this new build your own modular style. It may be moving to position themselves to bigger production companies. Yeah, I think that's exactly what they're doing. They're really trying to move upscale and get the bigger companies than they've had in the past. And my voice is starting to go. All right. They're building for a new market. This 2110 stuff isn't for us little guys. Yeah. It's very true. Okay. I would think they have more of an impact if they released an NMOS management tool. Their video hub switches actually do. So, and then their switches as well. So, the new network switch they just announced, as well as the older one that they announced last year, actually do have NMOS routing built into them. So yeah, they actually do support it already. So, for anybody who's not familiar, NMOS is the protocol that's used to route video from this source to this destination, video and or audio or whatever. So yeah. I think the better workflow for the higher refresh rates would be slow motion replays, higher FSP ISO to network storage for replay but UpDownCross for live to the switcher. Yeah, so high frame rate from the camera to storage through the HyperDeck to storage, and then to DaVinci Resolve, and then the UpDownCross to send the standard frame rate over to the ATEM for switching. If they were to build a standalone replay machine, that would be interesting and probably sell really well. I think so too. It seems like they're doubling down on using DaVinci Resolve in order to replay. And while that's not a terrible solution, it's also kind of limited. Like, it wouldn't work for most of the situations where I need instant replay. I need to be able to edit and put together multiple clips back to back in a very limited amount of time. Like, I essentially need to do a package of multiple clips within literal seconds, and the way that Resolve is set up, it's just not good for that. Yeah, same comment here. When you work in a production truck or a mid to high-end sports facility, the Resolve workflow isn't going to cut it. Yeah, absolutely. Replay operators are used to EVS or Dreamcatcher. Good luck finding a DaVinci replay operator. That is true. That is very true. That's a more or less non-existent network or non-existent position job right now. All right. For smaller events, using 2110 just as a digital SDI snake system from front of house to backstage looks really good use case. We're planning on doing to get rid of our heavy SDI snakes. You might consider just doing fiber instead. The 2110 is going to add at least 2 frames, maybe 3 frames of latency in each direction. And if you're doing things like iMag, that, because it's both directions, you may be adding 5 or 6 frames of additional latency just by doing those conversions. So at least consider doing just fiber, because that doesn't add any sort of latency. And you can do fiber trunk cables that have 24 strands very inexpensively. And if you really need to, you can actually do multiple different wavelengths of light over a single fiber strand. So in theory, you could do hundreds of video sources over a single fiber trunk that's a 1/4 inch in diameter and weighs next to nothing. So lots of latency broadcasters are on still on 1080i interlaced. Even the 2025 Super Bowl was 1080p scaled to Ultra HD. That is true. So overwhelming majority of things that are happening in broadcast across the board your traditional broadcast companies are still doing 1080i or 720p. Some have moved to 1080p, but it's not normal. It's not common. And almost nobody is embracing 4K. And then that world is embracing 4K as the normal workflow. So, yeah. Be interesting to see if there's an API or something for Fairlight Live. If it was that was the appeal of the Behringer mixers, being able to control them with OSC. Grant actually did mention that this is controllable using OSC as part of the presentation. So I suspect that a lot of the stuff that works with OSC could work with very limited changes to control Fairlight Live. So yeah, I don't see Sound Mixer switching from their allows CalRex and Fairlight consoles out of nowhere. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Does 2110 have more latency in general? Yes, it does. Just by its very nature, because all video sources on the network are synced. That means if you have a video source somewhere that is not in sync with your house sync, it's going to have to be delayed by up to a frame in order to be in sync with everything else that's on your 2110 network. And then very common that receiving devices will add an additional frame of latency on top of that to ensure that they're able to receive everything in time, just in case something gets out of order or part of one of the packets gets dropped or something like that. They want to have a little bit of additional buffer time, bad pun, a little additional buffer time in order to make sure that they're getting the full frame before they actually take it live. So 2 frames of latency is kind of your standard minimum for most things. It can be lower. You have to have sources that are designed from the get-go to be able to produce video with essentially 0 latency going out to the Ethernet network. But even then, you're going to have at least 1 frame of latency from the time you start setting something to the time it's going to be able to be displayed on anything. So 1 frame minimum, 2 is pretty much standard. 2 to 3 frames is pretty much standard with 2110, and that's in each direction. So yeah, and like I say, SportFlow says the same thing here. Around 1 frame, and 1's the minimum. SDI is fields latency or less. SDI can be pixels, and with proper gen lock, you can advance the timing on the sending device so that it is exactly in sync with the receiving device for very, very low latency. All right. No ATEM SDI Mini Extreme ISO G2 yet. Is that not shipped yet? I thought I had seen people actually using that. I've only seen 21 deployed on Arista or Cisco switches, which cost a fortune. There are others as well. Those may be the most common. I know Netgear has one that's compliant. So you're looking for AV certified switches more than anything else. Yeah. What about ATEM SDI ISO G2 changing to IP? There's a chance to view the G2 with SDI. Yeah, I'm not familiar with what they're doing with regard to the G2 in terms of, I'm pretty sure that has the 10 gig interface, but I don't know what its capabilities are in terms of 2110, if anything. I just haven't followed that one. That was not an interesting product for me, so I have not followed that one whatsoever. But yeah. Let's see, is there anything else here? All right, so some discussion of whether 2110 is a solid alternative for NDI. They're kind of different things. NDI is more of I have a handful of sources that I need to get from here to here, whereas 2110 is I need everything in my whole ecosystem to be able to talk to each other. I don't have a ton of experience with NDI. I have not used it a lot, but from what I've heard from people who do use it heavily is that it sort of breaks down when you get into a lot of different feeds on a network, even networks that are sort of isolated and or optimized for it. So NDI is sort of inherently limited to smaller productions, whereas 2110 is designed for bigger productions. So it might be some overlap in terms of the functionality that's there. The other one thing I would mention is NDI is inherently compressed, and 2110 is uncompressed. So you're talking about different quality of video between the two as well. So does 2010 SDI HDMI 12G up and down cross have the frame delay when using just the SDI and HDMI and vice versa? Well, it's going to have some. I mean, that's just the way 2110 works. So a lot of these 2110 devices, I didn't see any of the ones announced today, but some of the other devices that Blackmagic announced the last year or the year before have a reference sync output on them, which allows you to take that PTP timing source that's on your 2110 network and output that as a traditional Genlock signal on that reference output. And you can use that to connect a camera or other device that uses SDI or HDMI to get that in more precise timing with what's going on with your 2110 network. But there's still at least one frame of latency there. So, yeah. I was hoping to see a true replacement for the HyperDeck Extreme 8K. AJA and BMD have not updated their flagship recorders in 7 or 8 years. They're probably because they're working for people and they're putting their resources into newer stuff like the 2110. That's my guess. I'm not arguing that there should be updates, but yeah, it seems like their resources are elsewhere. I mean, I can tell you from talking to people who work at Blackmagic that they are very much resource constrained. That's their holdup for producing updated products. It's like it's people, having enough people in order to develop the new products. It's not lack of interest on their part that prevents new stuff from coming out or updates to older stuff. So they just don't have the people. I wonder if the Constellation HD line is going to get abandoned, pushing people either to minis or up to Constellation 4K. I don't see any reason that they would. I mean, the Constellation HDs are just scaled down versions of the 4K switchers, so it's easy. I think it's easy for Blackmagic to produce those. I mean, they're just operating slower than they would with the 4K signals. So, yeah, yeah. And considering most productions are in HD, I mean, I've had a 4K capable trailer I've had 4K capable equipment for 10 years now, and the number of times I've actually produced in 4K I can count on one hand. It's been very few. HD is still where it's at. I mean, I do 4K for this channel, but when I'm being hired to do work, it's been very rare that someone wants me to do 4K. They don't know what to do with the files. The files are enormous, and their computers are, at least traditionally, not really been very capable of editing them. So they just prefer having HD. There have been some hybrid events that I've done where I record 4K in camera and then switch in HD. I am doing a fair amount more of that, especially since I got my Z200s where they handle 4K a lot better than my Z150s did. But HD is still where most of us are producing video. Yeah. All right, hoping to see HyperDeck Extreme 8K update when you go full screen, the 4K windows when you're recording in quad 4K. That would make it a universal video assist viewer as well as recorder. That would be a nice feature. I can certainly mention it to some of the people that I talk to while I'm there. NDI for a 2-channel is okay, but not for complex situations. That's kind of the gist of what I've heard from people who actually do use NDI. It doesn't scale very well, so. 2110 can be a neat trick for small shows if you're packing several channels of video, audio, comms control over a single strand of fiber. Happy to see accessible 2110 ecosystems grow. That is true, but you can also do the same thing with SDI pretty easily as well. So, yeah, 2110 might be easier to do that, but you're probably spending more to get your video in and out of 2110 than you would be fiber. So. How soon do you think companies will start to actually implement 2110? Would learning these setups be of interest to corporate video tech? I think it's still going to be a handful of years before we actually start to see the 2110 stuff really start to trickle into the corporate market. This is really aimed at media companies and people who do this full-time professionally, particularly with infrastructure, like installed stuff, and not as useful for remote work. So, yeah, it's probably going to be. It's always good to be familiar with the technologies and at least understand where certain things are going. So yeah, I mean, it's always good to know this stuff. Hey, comment from Ryan. Hey, how's it going, Ryan? Glad to see you're watching. You and I need to catch up. Let's get in touch, and I wonder if you're going to NAB, and maybe we can catch up there. So yeah, Ryan's a good guy. He knows this stuff really well. Okay, I'm surprised the HyperDeck 8-channel HD rack mount hasn't been announced, given the mini ISO does this. It's something that we've been asking for a long time, and I think this new HyperDeck they just announced is probably their way of saying, "Hey, this is how we want you to do it." So, unfortunately, very pricey, not price effective for those of us still in an SDI workflow, but. Noticeable the beta firmware from Fairlight Live was done for the Constellation 4Ks, but not HDs. That could be a processing power issue, because those HDs do have less processing power internally, and maybe they either haven't figured out how to do it with the hardware that's in there, or maybe it's not possible with the hardware that's in there. So they didn't say. We don't know either way. Yeah. Does 2110 actually do 444 color instead of 422 SDI? It handles both. For devices that are coming from an SDI place, products that are being adapted from SDI or whatever, they're probably doing 422. But you're going to have to look at the actual each device to see what they're implementing, because 2110 handles either one of them just fine. It doesn't care. I mean, there is a standard saying for 2110 to be able to indicate that, hey, this is 444 instead of 422 or 420 or whatever. But yeah, so you kind of have to look to see what the standards are. Like with the new Constellation switchers, probably ought to just look and see if internally they're switching in 444 or 422. I suspect it's probably 422 because that's what Blackmagic has traditionally done. And going 444 actually does require twice the processing power. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. It appears to be for cheap snobs. Fairlight Live can bring in audio inputs hooked to an ATEM Mini Pro, but it doesn't appear to have a way to use traditional audio interfaces for input and output. That's not entirely true. As they were actually demonstrating it, they were using a Focusrite audio interface. So it very clearly does support USB and any other sort of device that's connected directly to a computer. But if you want to have a external hardware-based solution, that you'd want to invest in something that does audio to 2110. And those products do exist, but they're just not common quite yet. AV companies leading towards HD-based T, Crestron, NVX, etc. 2110 is the broadcast industry. That is generally true. So part of that just might be because that's what they're used to using, and they don't see the reason to go to 2110, but who knows? This year, there is no focus on working or switching via the cloud. I always find your content enjoyable and educational. Thanks. Well, thank you. So, yeah, they did not mention that at all this year, which is really odd because last year they did demonstrate a version of the ATEM running in the cloud. And they were very clearly very interested in having a lot of their products being able to send video up to their cloud infrastructure. So cameras and HyperDecks and some other things. So you could actually do switching up in the cloud. I have no idea if that's been abandoned or they just had a limited amount of time and they didn't want to introduce too many new things today. I have no idea. I have no way of knowing that. I have also heard no word on any of that stuff since it was announced last year. So it doesn't mean it's not happening. It also doesn't mean that it's still happening and it's taking longer than expected or what. But anyway, there is certainly a case for some hardware or some cloud-based switching. A lot of remote productions would be able to benefit from that. I've done quite a number of remote productions at this point, and traditionally I've used something like Zoom or Teams to bring in remote video sources or even SRT. And it works, but it requires a trailer full of equipment to do it properly. Whereas if it could everything could just go up to the cloud and switch in the cloud, that would be easier in some of those situations. So. I know that there's some other comments that have not popped up in my software just yet. But anyway, so I mean, I've kind of indicated this a few times throughout, but I don't feel any compelling need to move to 2110 with stuff that I'm doing. And I would say that's probably in particular with my trailer, because I have limited power. I have to maintain a power budget with that. And the number of things that I would have to add to my trailer could very easily push me past my power budget in order to make this thing work the way that it really would need to. Mostly because it's more devices, not because any particular device is considerably more power hungry, but just that I'd have to have more gear in order to make it all work. So Fairlight audio would be awesome hosted on a Mac Mini M4 with the Digiface Dante to bring 192 channels of audio to that and fully integrate with ATEM switchers. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. It's unfortunate that we don't have PCIe available on Macs any longer, because Thunderbolt just doesn't have anywhere near the same bandwidth. And Thunderbolt can be pretty low latency, but it's not going to be as low as PCIe. So, yeah, it's sad that Apple decided to discontinue the Mac Pro, but they did it because nobody was buying them. So, I think I really get the feeling that people who are needing that sort of workflow have moved to Windows, as frustrating as that can be for a lot of them. Check this out. They got a good point. I'm not sure what that's referring to. Anyway, so let's see, how long have I been going here? It's now 3:15. I started at 1:30. So coming up on 2 hours here before too long. So I see a comment in the chat that hasn't popped up on my software just yet, but it makes me laugh. I'll wait for that to show up and then share it with everybody. So anyway, what do you guys think? I know some of you have expressed some opinions here in the chat, but what do you guys think? Like, is 2110 something that you're interested in? Is it intriguing? Is it something that you can eventually see yourself using? As something you're going to be using soon? Something you've actually spent time with? I'm kind of curious to hear what the experience of this audience is, specifically with 2110. So, let's see. This is the comment. I need 2110 simply because it exists. Yeah. There is some of that in this world, isn't there? So, yeah. All right. The Blackmagic is on a very interesting path, but they need something for audio and replay as a standard hardware solution without relying on 2110. I'm not going to disagree, but I'm also going to say that I don't think they're interested in doing that. I think that they like their way of doing things, and they don't generally change path on stuff once they've gone down a specific path and doing it the way that they envision that it should be done. So, I would be shocked if they were to actually do that. So, I would hope Fairlight could take the mics off the cameras over SDI and Dante over to our Yamaha. Do you think that could work? Maybe. I kind of get that impression that's one of the things that they intend to do with the new Fairlight Live software and connecting over USB. That's another thing I forgot to mention. So a lot of these ATEM switchers that are receiving the software update are the models that have the webcam feature. And what they're going to be allowing is you to switch back and forth between either USB webcam or this audio capability. So you can turn one on and at the same time turning the other off. But it seems like they're basically saying we want to have a way to get audio out of the ATEM switchers into Fairlight Live for processing. But at the same time, they're also seem to be saying that Fairlight Live will control the audio mixer that's already in the ATEM. So that portion would not require audio to be traveling over USB, and it probably wouldn't require that mode switch. So I think the indicators are that USB audio from those switchers should be a possibility. I want that. I just don't need a Mac Pro. If I had the hardware and a Mac Mini and a 1 or 2 rack unit with 1 or 2 PCIe slots, that'd be perfect for me. A lot of people are in that same boat, but Apple seems to not be interested in doing that. It's just, they seem to have more or less entirely walked away from supporting PCI Express. Thanks for the stream. Always informative and must watch after any Blackmagic announcement. Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate you saying that. So, the 2110 12G UpDownCross not do SDI to HDMI and HDMI to SDI as well as ignoring 2110. Would there still be latency? Did that even have HDMI on it? I don't recall. Let me look at the product information page, see what it says. I think one thing is fairly clear, though, is that I think they're pretty much saying, like, if you're going to be in the 2110 world, we expect you to abandon HDMI and go SDI if you're using any legacy format. That's the wrong one. That's the wrong converter. UpDownCross. I can show this here. And let's see. Whoops. No, not that. I don't think I have a button to get rid of my lower third. I have to do it over here. There we go. All right. So 2110 IP. Did they not show any about the back panel on that one? These are all their older ones. Cameras. That's, yeah, the older converter. Okay, there's a Studio Bridge. SDI expander. Okay, 2110, yeah. UpDownCross, it has no SDI or HDMI. It's literally all just IP, all just 2110. So, yeah, and then the SDI expander is SDI only. So you can see that, like, they're not doing HDMI on any of these 2110 products. So, yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Just to be blunt, HDMI for people who work in professional video, HDMI is a thorn in our side. We hate it, and would love if it was to just go away. SDI is 1,000 times better. So, whenever I have to do with HDMI, I convert it to SDI as quick as I can with the shortest cable I can get away with, because it's just SDI works so much better. So, yeah, I really suspect that you're not going to see much by the way of 2110 products that have HDMI connections. There are some exceptions to that. Like if I can find it on the page here. Where was it? This one right here. These two both actually. So these do HDMI. In this case. Okay, yeah. Okay, so it's IP to HDMI. So I actually have a few of these. I don't use them for 2110. I use them for SDI fiber because they support both. But yeah, so you get IP or SFP IP or SDI video over fiber coming into this, and it converts it to HDMI. And that's kind of about it. Now, this is SDI output, bidirectional or SDI only. That's all SDI. Yeah, for the most part. Okay, so this UpDownCross does have HDMI in and out, as well as the 10 gig. But none of the new products they announced today do HDMI inputs, and only a handful had HDMI outputs. So, yeah, I think they're basically saying, if you're doing 2110, stay away from HDMI. All right. Give me the Sonic Tech Mac Mini enclosure thing, but as a first-party solution with true PCIe. That'd be nice, but like all these things that are relying on Thunderbolt, they're operating at a tiny fraction of the bandwidth the PCI Express has, and they do so with additional latency. So it's not a great solution, unfortunately. I'm standing here waiting for them to update their standalone fiber camera converter. I assume you mean the ATEM camera converter, the silver box. They have not updated that, but at the same time, actually I'm on the right page here. So if I go back to this page here, they have this thing right here, the Mini Bidirect 12G SFP. This unit actually serves as a somewhat decent replacement or upgrade for that old camera converter. So it's designed for 2110 primarily, but you can put one of the SMPTE-style video SFPs into this, go into the software and change its mode, and then this will act as a camera converter working with their old legacy products without the latency of 2110 and giving you 4K capability. So you get 4K and communication. You do not get the on-screen tally. There's no battery. It doesn't have a proper belt clip. So there are some limitations for it, but when I have needed to do 4K productions, this is what I need. This is what I used to do it now, because it does provide a lot of that same functionality. So, just an FYI on that. The only thing I'm interested in for studio is simplifying my cable runs on the floor. PoE++ on 10G to power and handle tally and bidirectional video feeds just sounds too enticing. Yeah. As long as your cable run distances work with PoE++ on a 10 gig connection. 10 gig on Cat 8. You get reasonable distance, but nowhere near the distances that personally I need for my production. So I have to do fiber with my stuff, which means no PoE, right? 2110 is a future thing, maybe, for me. I already downloaded the Fairlight Live, and as audio first guy, this is the most interesting thing in this stream. I'll definitely be trying it out. Yeah, it certainly looks like it's going to be interesting to play with. So, yeah. What equipment are you hoping for but didn't get during the Blackmagic Design presentation? The big one for me is new rack mount monitors. I so want to upgrade my Smart Scope Duo monitors. The LCD on those things is horrible, and they have some other limitations. I really badly want a new rack mount monitor that's based on their Video Assist products. I think that would be a huge seller if they were to produce one. I've even started shopping for other brands at this point because I just can't possibly invest in any more of those Smart Scope with the age they are. It's a screen that's like 400 by 480 pixels. Very low contrast, poor viewing angles. The scopes on it lack reticules, well, at least the vector scope. Yeah, the waveform monitor has weird scaling on it. It works, but it's just weird, and it's ancient, and desperately needs to be upgraded. So, other than that, I would still like to see rack mount HDMI, SDI bidirectional converters. I have a lot of situations, and I know a lot of other people do, where we need to convert both directions for multiple channels, and having to install multiple of their micro or mini converters in a rack is just awkward. So I'd love to see that. I forget what else. I mean, I've had a list of things that I've wanted them to do for a long time that just don't seem to be coming to pass. Hello from Isle of Man. I've tipped my toe in 2010. Bought a pair of the 3X 3G units. I bought a pair of the 3X 3G units and used them back to back for 3-camera shoot. Very solid performance, but mainly SDI. Those are among the units that I bought and tested, and I was getting 3 frames of latency each direction on those, so they don't work for my workflow. But glad they're working for yours. So, yeah. 2110 seems to be an interesting concept. Fiber still seems like king of video unless somehow there's some future use where streaming from Ethernet video source becomes faster or better quality. Well, the quality on 2110 is there because it's uncompressed. So you're not losing any quality for 2110 compared to SDI. The biggest issue is latency and the cost of upgrading that. So, are in the process OG building a new small OB setup in 12G SGI, or so I thought. I'm wondering if I had to build something that's already too old and compatible with what hits the road. I would at least consider 2110, but I don't think you would be making a mistake building something using 12G SDI today. That's still very relevant and will continue to be for a while. So, this is the 1000G, not 12. I'm not sure what that responds to. Trying to figure out if the F2110 IP, 2110 UpDownCross is also an HDMI SDI and SDI to HDMI with no latency. And then, okay, so the older one, so what you're talking about. I'm pretty sure it does do SDI to HDMI and HDMI to SDI. But if I remember right, it only does 2 total conversions, one from one of the inputs to one of the outputs, and one. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong. I think if you're doing SDI to HDMI, you can't also do HDMI to SDI at the same time. If I'm remembering right, I could be way off on that. That it's not a product that I own, have not spent any time with, so I don't know the ins and outs of it myself. I always wonder how many of Blackmagic Design's product photos are real and how many are computer generated. I would say pretty much anything that's high resolution that you can click in and zoom in on, those are renders. And then photographs probably come in to play more where you're seeing the equipment actually being used somewhere. That's just a guess. I don't know that for sure. Yeah. Yes, HDMI is a massive pain. But presenters bringing their laptops for a keynote presentation or even more breakout rooms uncomfortable isn't going away anytime soon. Yeah, agreed. But that's kind of why I said I convert to SDI as soon as I possibly can. So I will very often have a decimator or one of my Blackmagic ATEM converters, ATEM Studio or camera converters, right there at the podium where a presenter is to convert to SDI and or fiber as soon as possible. And micro HDMI was even worse. That's one of the worst connectors that's ever been inflicted upon mankind. If you want just a standalone standard converters, there's always the Terranex standards converters. The Terranex ones are the gold standard. They have to give you the best conversion that you can get from anything that I'm aware of. If you need budget, then you can get the micro converters. They have the UpDownCross, which allows you to do format conversion, the traditional UpDownCross HD. They have not had 4K until the 2110 that they announced last year in terms of the UpDownCross series. Of course, the Terranex do it, but yeah. Going 40 feet from the rack, so the run distance isn't the worst. That 40 feet, you're fine. Yeah, no problem with the 10G. OLED monitors, please. That'd be interesting. Blackmagic, as far as I'm aware, has never done anything with OLED. Can't recall ever having seen them do anything with it. So, off topic, how's your basement going? I've not seen an update in ages. That's because I haven't done much. I've got the studio ready to go. And I did some construction on the recording studio portion of it. But I've not done much. I've been slammed with stuff. So it's still in the plans. I just am moving a lot slower than I wanted. But to configure Blackmagic 80x80, which is 8,000, there is no way to set up something like that in 2110 for that price. Not at all. If you go 80x80, you cannot convert that to IP. So you don't do it in a single unit. That's the thing. With 2110, you do your switching using network switches, and you can fairly easily cascade from one to another. So the switch that they announced today handles 64 in, 64 outs. So you buy 2 of those, and you could handle 80 sources, 80 destinations. As long as you're not sending more than 64 sources between the 2 units, then it would handle it. So in terms of routing, 2110 actually gives you a lot of advantages. So yeah, because you don't have to do dedicated routing switchers. You actually just use your Ethernet network to do the switching, and traditional switches handle all of that for you. Rack mount HDMI to SDI bidirectional. It's not with the 2110 bidirectional 12G. If you just pretend it doesn't do 2110, you can, but you're only getting 2 or 3 units in a single rack space. I'm talking about like a 1 rack space unit that does conversion of 8 or 10 channels. So not just 2. Yeah. 2110 ecosystem is in its infancy, and the cost to have convert legacy devices to work inside the new 2110 ecosystem would not be practical. Won't be diving in anytime soon. If you look at it as a situation where you convert everything, yeah, it's very expensive. I wouldn't say that 2110 is in its infancy. I would say that Blackmagic's implementation of 2110 is in its infancy. 2110's been around for a while now. It's not a brand new thing. It's just been unattainable to those who are working on a budget. But you can certainly implement 2110 piece by piece. You don't have to convert everything all at once. You can intermix. So yeah. Any trailer or fly pack upgrades planned, i.e. bigger routers? I know you talked about it previously and wondering if prices have dropped with the new stuff that's been announced. I still very much want to upgrade the ATEM switcher in my trailer, if not the video hubs as well. It's been difficult for me to justify doing that because I spend a bunch of money and I don't gain any new capabilities that I haven't had. So other things have taken precedence. I was going to do the trailer upgrades a year ago, but then Sony came out with the PXWZ 200 cameras, and that did provide very real, tangible benefits to my production. So what I would have budgeted for the trailer upgrades went to cameras. And then just recently, I upgraded all of the computers in my trailer. With one exception, all the computers in the trailer are new. That was not exactly cheap, especially with some of the hardware prices that are happening right now. I've done some upgrades on the network in there. Like I'm doing 10 gig networking in the trailer now, where I was just 1 gig before. Not for everything, but for critical components. And brand new Wi-Fi network. I'm always doing some sort of upgrades. I just added a second DSP to my intercom in my trailer, so there's that. Not running just a single DSP at this point, and I plan to do even more cool things with that. I'm discovering more and more awesome things that I can do with those Symmetrix DSP units that I hadn't really even thought about before. And along with that, that means redoing all of the BitFocus companion integration that I have going on with that. So that's my current focus, is like redoing all that at the moment. So I've spent quite a few afternoons and evenings doing that. So yeah. All right, the HyperDeck Shuttle 4K Pro prompter made very cool, but you've noticed when you flip the image for your HDMI, it also flips the image on the screen. It's kind of useless. That's a weird quirk, but at the same time, when you're dealing with professional prompters, the monitor itself will do the flipping for you. So I'm sure that's why it's not gotten any attention. And if you need to do that separately, you can pick yourself a decimator, MDHX. It'll flip for you as well. So they can update it to not flip the image on its own screen and only the monitor. That would be a very, very powerful prompter tool. That'd be a nice feature, but I don't see it happening, honestly. I'd love a Blackmagic Design switcher with one button that fixes everything, preferably labeled Panic. If they figured that out, they'd take over the world. Yeah. I work at a major broadcaster, and our new control rooms are all SDI and Dante based, and I don't see any 2110 anytime soon. It's going to be a very personal decision for every organization that's doing video equipment, whether 2110 makes sense or not. It really comes into its own when you do huge deployments. That's really where you benefit. Right now, it's still more cost-effective to do SDI, Dante. Dante gives you a lot of capabilities that are pretty awesome, honestly. 2110 is kind of like your video version of Dante, right? It's just too expensive to implement with today's hardware. If 100 gig switches were the price we're paying for 1 gig switches, then yeah, 2110 can make a lot of sense. But the fact that if you want to do a real 2110 deployment, you're talking about major expenses for your networking infrastructure. That's a big deal. I agree. Blackmagic needs a true one rack unit 8 bidirectional converter that would help with a lot of cable management and rid the 810 Velcro converters along with all the power supplies. Yep, that's exactly the use case. I hear people talk about it all the time. Got this, but routing the signal gets way more complex. Sure, you're more versatile with IP routing, whatever the standard is. I like video over IP if it's NDI or 2110 or whatever. But the delay is a pain, and you need to get too deep into network stuff to get that working. It depends on the gear you're working with. I think Blackmagic's trying to address that with their switches. Their switches are set up so that you literally just plug them in and they work. It certainly helps to understand the underlying technologies that are required on a switch in order to make it function perfectly. But yeah, you don't have to be a networking expert with this new gear. That's one of the reasons they're doing it. A major TV network is upgrading to 1080p for satellite delivery, so I think it says a lot about their feature format. Yeah. I think broadcasters have not been at all convinced that even 4K is worth it. So, memory is about as expensive per megabyte as it was when I had a Pentium 90. A bit of an exaggeration, but yes, point taken. It's pretty bad. Yeah. Sure, TV isn't everything most of us do, YouTube or weddings or corporate events where 4K makes more sense than a TV studio that's compressing it out through airwaves. Yes, but consumers aren't even sold on 4K. So I like 4K mostly because it gives me more flexibility when I'm editing, being able to crop shots and that kind of thing. But for just regular viewing, most people can't tell the difference between 4K and 1080, especially at normal viewing distances on the devices that people actually really use. Would love to see a trailer intercom update. I've been planning on doing it. I just got a few things that I wanted to get finished up that are sort of still in flow before I actually take the time to shoot that. So, but yeah, it is in the plans. I just haven't done it quite yet. The one big holdout right now is the interface to a two-way radio. I really badly want to add a two-way radio to my intercom system. I mean, I have audio coming in, but I want to be able to transmit out on the two-way radio. And I need to build an interface to do that. I've designed the circuit, but I haven't made it yet. So, yeah. All right. Why hasn't Blackmagic embraced Dante licensing? Most likely, I'd say that's probably the biggest reason. But that's, again, complete and total speculation on my part. I have Absolutely no insider information on that whatsoever. Dante is not terrible to license, but it's also not free. And the one thing about Audinate is, like, anytime you do hardware that uses Dante, they want you to use their interface chips to do it. So you can't just do a firmware upgrade on a piece of equipment and add Dante to it. It actually needs one of Audinate's devices inside of it. And of course that adds cost. So that's most likely the reason. For the number of channels that we would probably want, it probably would add significant cost. I'm intrigued with 2110. I'd love to move to it, but I'm also deeply invested in SDI and the hardware that I have now. We will see. But again, as mentioned earlier, you could do it as a gradual thing. You don't have to outright replace your stuff. It's not ideal, but it absolutely can work. So I think Blackmagic is taking too big of a leap towards 2110 with today's announcements, and in my opinion, they shouldn't abandon the standard lineups like they seem to be aiming for. I'm sort of halfway between that and what they're doing. I think that having good quality 2110 products in their lineup is wise. And Blackmagic has always been at least a little bit forward-looking with a lot of their stuff. I mean, they started producing stuff with using 6 gig SDI and 12 gig SDI before they were really official standards. They made 4K available to those of us who do this kind of thing well before anybody else did in this segment of the market. I think they're probably trying to do the same thing again, get people to move in that direction by making the stuff a lot more affordable. As to whether that actually pans out or not, tough to say. I mean, you look back at their addition of 4K support to a lot of their products, where everybody else was still HD only. That was probably more needed than this, but we'll see. We'll give it 5 years, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. 4K is kind of a farce. It's not about the resolution. It's about the bitrate and color depth and all the other benefits of 4K YouTube video that you're watching in 420 is going to look and sound better. That's maybe oversimplifying a little bit, but point taken. And I would agree to some degree. But a lot of what you're talking about with 4K is absolutely possible with other resolutions. You talk about, one of the things we get with 4K traditionally, at least with the way that things have played out, is HDR. There's absolutely no reason you can't do HDR with 1080 or 720 or even 480 for that matter. It's just a different color space. So, if it's about getting HDR capabilities, you don't have to shoot 4K to do that. Like my current cameras, they'll shoot HDR in 1080, and my old cameras, my Z150s, they shoot HDR in 1080. YouTube absolutely supports it. It's just that most people have associated HDR with 4K, and so if you're upgrading to do one, you might as well upgrade to do both. So, yeah. I think Blackmagic is being more and more expensive. Is there a new vendor that can take Blackmagic's place and disrupt the market? Well, you've got your no-name Chinese brands that are introducing a lot of inexpensive products. The thing that Blackmagic brought to the table, which you don't see with a lot of the Chinese vendors, is pretty good reliability. Not perfect, and certainly not perfect, but it's been pretty good. And they've done that affordably, which is new. We've kind of always had cheap, generic, not so great equipment available as an alternative to the expensive good stuff. But Blackmagic sort of found a niche that's somewhere in the middle, where it works well enough to be used professionally, but doesn't cost the same as high-end professional gear. So, and I think they're trying to do that exact same thing with 2110. Have you looked into Sennheiser Spectera? I would love to add that to my rig for audio solves. Oh, I have not. I'm not even familiar with that. I'll have to try to remember to look into that. So, yeah. Focus specifically on live video for streaming and broadcast. The key question is whether advertisers pay more for 720p versus 4K, and the answer is no, they don't. Well, yeah, the advertisers generally aren't going to care about that. That's more about the company that you're streaming for. A lot of people that I work with aren't even aware that there's a difference, frankly. And it sounds funny, but in this day and age, I still find it problematic to get high quality internet connections in a lot of the venues that I work in, where even getting 1080p might be asking too much, let alone 4K. Because when you go from HD to 4K, you're talking about 4 times the data, assuming the same protocol and video quality. So, yeah. Said for years, bit rates matter way more than resolution. I would take high bitrate 720p as versus a low bitrate 4K. That is generally true, but if you can shoot 4K and then downscale to 720, you're going to get a better looking image than if you shoot 720 native. So having the 4K capability does give you a better quality signal, even if you're not really using it. So high bitrate 1080 would be great. That's been available for most people streaming for a while. Whether we as video producers have enough bandwidth to upload it is another issue. But yeah, I'm not against them investing in 2110, but I'm concerned with the fact that today's announcement didn't include a single update or new feature to the existing HDMI SDI one. Maybe not the converters, but they did announce several new capabilities with the ATEMs. So. Yeah, the new audio stuff, that's a significant upgrade. That's something that a lot of people have been wanting. So there is that. Yeah. I'm more referring to YouTube, like YouTube, when you upload a 4K video, they give you, and that's why people upscale their 1080p to 4K. Well, yeah, it's overly compressed because they have bandwidth costs that they want to keep down and storage costs that they want to minimize. Truly high quality 1080p does look really, really good. And then uploading as 4K to YouTube to stream in 1080 is just kind of a hack that sort of bypasses some of the stuff that they're doing. But it doesn't mean that you have to do 4K to get high quality video. So kind of see Yellow Box as a competitor taking up space for the entry level as well. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So those are your Chinese brands. So, and some of them are producing decent products, but can you see a national broadcaster investing in YOLO equipment? No, they aren't going to do that. Whereas at this point, they not only do consider Blackmagic, they do use Blackmagic. Maybe not for switchers or critical infrastructure, but you do find them using Blackmagic for other stuff. So, feels like Blackmagic put most of us on the back burner to focus on 2110. Hopefully they'll revisit and improve older products and standards. We'll see. If this 2110 stuff doesn't take off, then maybe we get reprioritized. But I just have a feeling that they're internally putting all their resources into future products instead of updating old ones. I mean, that's how you make money, right? In this business, you don't make any money doing upgrades for old products. So you put all your time and effort, all your resources into producing new stuff. So, yeah. Several new features that some Chinese brands are starting to introduce that I think are fundamentally missing in Blackmagic products. I'm afraid they may lose some market share. Maybe. Whether that's significant or not, that's certainly up for debate. It doesn't matter how good some of these brands actually get. I would not put them in my main workflow. So, yeah. High quality internet connections. You don't use a peplink to combine cellular and Ethernet or LiveU. I mean, I have all that stuff, but I still have venues that I work in where cellular is unusable. I did a perfect example. I shot a national jump rope competition last summer. The venue internet was absolute garbage, and cellular connectivity was basically zero. So what do you do in that situation? Starlink's not fast enough. But I had my HyperDeck with multiple cellular connections going, 3 or 4 cellular connections going, and it wasn't enough bandwidth to even do good quality 720p. And the only significant bandwidth I got was from the venue itself, and it was horribly unreliable. It disconnected on me multiple times throughout the course of the day. It was allegedly fiber, but it would go from 100 megabit to 0, and then stay there for a couple of minutes, and then go back to 100 megabit, and it could still ping, but there was no bandwidth. So, yeah, I mean, what do you do with that? I mean, that's the kind of problem I run into more than anything else. I've got another one that I do every 4th of July here. It's on the mountain. Almost zero cellular connectivity from there. We have to use this day and age. We actually have to use Ubiquiti wireless to beam the signal to someone's house down the hill, where they get an internet connection. Excuse me. So, yeah, good quality internet connections are the biggest problem I run into these days. So, yeah. Just saw the update video. Real happy with finally getting that going this hard in 2010. I wish I only did Constellation IP2ME. It'd be nice, but they're gonna kind of discuss this earlier. But they start on the high end and then fill in the holes later on. Yeah. The Solaris looks scary. Yes. Yeah, that monster. That thing is crazy. Oh yeah. I guess the request for updated SmartView Duos will have to wait for another year. Yeah. Ultimately, I think I'm going to end up investing in something from another brand. There's some interesting stuff from Lilliput out there in terms of rack mount monitors that do scopes, have full 1080p screens, far better quality screens than anything that Blackmagic is doing with their rack mount monitors at this point. Yeah. Apart from today's announcements for Blackmagic, how have you been and how is business going for you? Up and down. I'm feeling fine. Business is up and down, but that's sort of the nature of this whole thing, right? In terms of the software side of things, I mean, one of my biggest contract that I was working on ended a little over a year ago, first of the year, a year ago. And my other big one that I've been working on for the last little while is wrapping up here in the next month or two. And I've not found a good replacement for it. So I'm sort of in the market to find another software contract. I'm debating on whether I want to really dive in on producing software for this community as sort of my eventual full-time thing. I know there's not enough of a market for me to do that just yet. Not with the products that I have currently. I would need to do something new. I intend to do that. I just have not had the time with other projects going on. But I mean, ultimately, I would love to get to a point where my full-time job is working in this video world, primarily doing software for this world. So, I mean, that's where I would love to end up, just not feasible right now. And that's why I have not put more time into it just yet. Chicken and egg problem, right? But I've got a ton of software ideas for this community that some of them could be game changing. I just have not had time to produce them. The likelihood of that happening is improving. Particularly with AI, I do use some AI tools pretty heavily, not for the major portions of my development because the code that even the best AIs produce today is just too buggy for me. but it does help with a lot of the tediousness of doing software development. So, yeah, but there's a reveal, like where I want to go. I do want to get to a point where my main job is making software for video producers. So, yeah, I got to figure out how to make it happen. So, thought on IPMX as a possibility for the Pro AV market as a stepping stone to 2010. I don't know enough about it to really comment on that. Maybe somebody else in the community can actually weigh in on that. Blackmagic provides accessible products. They actually show that you can do systems that would cost much more for accessible prices. Yeah, that's always been their game. I think that was Grant's MO when he started Blackmagic 20 plus years ago. Yeah. It's hard to get good net with live views too sometimes. Yeah, it's not a matter of what product you're using or products or whatever to get a good quality connection. If it isn't there, it isn't there. Yeah. Starlink and a live view have been great as well. I really wanted the BMD 4K encoder to work, but it doesn't dynamically change bitrate like a live view does to stay connected. Yeah, LiveView definitely handles that better than some of the other products that are out there. My experience with Starlink is even though it's improving all the time, when it gets to its lower bit rates, the video quality generally has to drop more than I'm willing to accept. I know they have some higher end plans, so if somebody was needing it all the time and could justify those really high end plans, it can be a lot better, but for the type of plan that makes sense for me, upload bandwidth is not enough to do decent quality video as the sole connection. It would always have to be supplemented with something. I keep trying it. I mean, I have Starlink equipment and I have a plan, but as of now, I've still not seen high enough upload bandwidth to really rely on it as my primary connection. I wonder if Blackmagic is going to create an XLR stage box to work with Fairlight Live. It would be great to integrate with live audio for hybrid events. I wonder if the latency is okay for PAs. The latency is the big question for me. Like other software-based mixers that we've seen just have too much latency. So that if they figured out a solution to make that work better, great. But in my experience, that's hard to do with a computer. In terms of a stage box, I don't see them doing it, but there are any number of other solutions that would work. A Dante adapter, you could absolutely use Dante with Fairlight Live. So, yeah. LP audio has been around for many years. It feels like we are now at a point when IP video or IP audio for broadcasting is being accessible. It's accessible, but it's not as easy. The amount of bandwidth that's needed for video is just so much more. What are the audio updates to the 2ME Constellation HD? I'm planning to upgrade from the ATEM 1 Production Studio 4K, but I don't see a way in the Constellation to monitor audio easily. Right now, there are no updates for the HD versions of the Constellation. And Grant didn't say anything about whether the announcements today are going to be coming to that model. If you're wanting future-proofing and the chance of more upgrades, consider getting the 4K version of that switcher. So I think the HD ones are probably too constrained to be adding new features to them. Well, the Production Studio 4K easily use studio monitors. With the Production Studio 4K, I easily use studio monitors, but the Constellations don't have XLR monitoring, which I don't like. Yeah, it's certainly a trade-off. There's an easy solution to that. Just pick up one of the legacy, the older model mini converters, SDI to HDMI mini converters, and use the TRS audio outputs on those. You can pick those things up for like $50 or less. So that's what I've done in my flypack. And in a couple cases, I converted to AES, but yeah. It's on a great deal. I'm a little bit of a similar boat, wanting to eventually transition to writing software for myself or for industries and communities I'm a part of. Yeah.
So I would love if I could just snap my fingers and say that's what I'm going to do from now on, and know that it works out. But yeah, there's a transition period. So, I mean, even if I came out with a new software product today, it likely would not produce enough income for me to live on for at least a few months. So, all right, where is Whit nowadays? She is still in Salt Lake area. She lives out sort of the west side of town. She's still doing productions. She's doing her own thing for a while, but I think she's working for somebody else at the moment. She posts quite a bit on her Instagram and even her YouTube channel sometimes these days. She's actually come and helped me on a few productions over the last year or so. So I've actually had the chance to visit with her a few times. And she's still Whit. She's still fun, still passionate about all the filmmaking stuff. And so, yeah, so I wouldn't say I have regular contact with her, but yeah, I have chatted with her quite a number of times in the last little while. So it's been good reunions when we've been able to get together. So, Fairlight Live looks like the start of them taking audio seriously. Be testing it ASAP. It's sad that we have to say seriously, finally, and seriously, because I mean they've owned that Fairlight stuff for a number of years now and haven't done a whole lot with it. So yeah, I've also seen people using multiple Starlinks, like 2 or 3, slightly pointed differently in the sky, combining the internet connections to get a solid 4K stream. Yes, but the problem with that is you're probably still talking to the same satellites. So if you don't have a great connection to any of the satellites that are flying overhead, then all 3 of them, or 2 or 3 of them, are going to have the same bandwidth issues. So yes, having multiple will multiply the bandwidth that you're getting, but if your base bandwidth, because of satellite location or line of sight to them, is poor, or their line of sight to the ground station is not great, then yeah, it's still not going to be great. So I've heard that people have been able to make it work, but yeah, when I've tried it, it's not worked out well. I have not updated my video on it because every time I try it, it's been the same result. So yeah. Okay. They're down to stage boxes. Yes. Anyway, and for Fairlight Live, you can use pretty much anything you can use to get computer audio on your computer. In the presentation, they showed a window that said the latency was like 68 milliseconds. What was that for? Is that for their 2110 stuff? 68 milliseconds. That's going to be what, about 5 frames at 60p? Yeah. Doug, do you have any settings for your Z200? What are you using for live, Cinetone, etc.? I do use Cinetone most of the time. I have tweaked it just a little bit. I have dropped the black level a tiny bit. I've increased the matrix setting just so slightly to give it a little bit more saturation. Depending on the production, I might turn on the skin softening a little at one of the lower levels. I definitely never turn it up all the way, but I don't generally tweak it that much. I actually like the image from Cinetone base settings quite a lot. If you want some additional LUTs that actually make it look, I wouldn't necessarily say better, but different, Doug Jensen, which is kind of funny, that's his name, but Doug Jensen actually has released some LUTs on his website you can load into the camera to produce a more traditional image. And they're based on Cinetone, so they still have some of the characteristics of Cinetone, but make the images look a little bit more normal, for lack of a better way to say it. I own a company with 2 other partners, and we're currently working on our own in-house HTML sports graphic system because we do rally live streams and we couldn't find a good solution. Yeah, I hear that kind of story a lot. There's still an opening for somebody to do high quality graphics, live graphics, and HTML5/CSS/SVG / related technologies do offer a very compelling, easy to code solution for a lot of that stuff. So if you look into the OGraph stuff, there's some interesting things going on there. And the nice thing about that is it can be rendered by pretty much anything, which means in our world, it's really easy to, for example, drop it into OBS and output it via DeckLink. That's essentially what I'm doing for these lower third graphics that I'm doing today. I'm using H2R graphics to create them, but it's HTML. It's just HTML that's doing it, and then OBS renders it to a video output. But at the same time, like, none of the existing solutions that I've seen that do graphics based on HTML5 have what I would call a quick, easy-to-use interface for creating stuff in real time. That's something I've considered taking on, but at the same time, I see that market getting very flooded here before long. I think a lot of people have that same idea. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that we find some pretty good solutions showing up fairly soon. In some cases, even free. So that's sort of what holds me back from diving into that market myself. But I definitely see a need for some better graphics tools than what we've had. If you saw the video that I did a couple years ago on my own graphics software that I produced 22 years ago now, which I still use, you kind of understand where I'm coming from. Because that software was designed around this idea of making a graphic live on the fly, quickly and easily. And I have not seen anything else like that anywhere. So that's kind of why I've thought about actually taking that one on. I don't see anybody else doing it, but at the same time, I don't want to jump in and find out that, hey, some other company is finally doing it, and me being the little guy never gets any sort of attention with it. IPMX is great. Matrox have converted a lot to do IPMX to 2110. They can do compressed or uncompressed IPMX. I'll have to do a little more research into that. I'm just not familiar with it enough to know anything about it. So when you use LiveView to use the paid LRT, it's amazing. I wouldn't use it without it, honestly. So yeah, that's the real benefit for using the LiveView stuff. Yeah. I've just installed the Fairlight Fairlight Live Beta. No docs for the app at present, but the manual and installer packages are resolved. It's beta, so that's sort of the norm for software development. I get the software working first and then do documentation later. Biggest thing holding uncompressed video back is the cost of network switches, as 1 gigabit seems to be the most popular. Switches with 100 gig or 10 gig connections are costly, which is stopping IPs. Yeah, so I mean that has been the big issue, getting switches that are fast enough to handle all that data, because there is a lot of data there. So following up on Z200 question, I'd love to know if you can set up the SRT settings or if you stuck with predefined presets. Now you can tweak them. You can absolutely tweak them. It's not super flexible, but yeah, you can do some tweaking of those settings. So when you go into that screen to tell it you want to use SRT, there's an option in there to let you edit the 3 presets that are there. IPMX is great and bridges AV and broadcast. I think I already did that one. No. Is TeraDeck still your favorite encoder with bonding? Are there other options you're looking at? It's still the one that I use because I already own that gear, and I have 5 or 6 different TeraDeck encoders, and they all work with the core service that they have, the HyperDeck core. So if I was to take on something else, I'd be buying new gear, and these encoders, especially if you're going to do 4K, are not cheap. So yeah, they have not updated anything about the cloud router that announced in NAB 2004. Were you expecting anything? And I thought they might at least commented on it, but it's pretty clear that 2110 was going to be the focus of this announcement. So pretty excited about the IP updates from Blackmagic, but also everything running on 100 gigabit is a bit crazy, really pushing the limit of affordable networks at present day. Yeah, the pricing on their 100 gigabit switch that's the biggest shocker for me of anything that I saw today. I don't think anybody else even comes anywhere near that pricing for that kind of switching capability. So, excuse me. Yeah, that was the most surprising thing of anything I saw today. Well, using a completely custom solution built from scratch is also able to use OGraph templates, and so far we're doing great progress and very happy with your light. Things have become so yes, OGraph is a good starting place. The thing that's been lacking there is a good interface to build those. So, but rendering is trivial because it's just HTML. So rendering that is you can get free software to do that, no problem. So, well, I think it's probably about time to wrap this up. We're coming up on. We would be at 3 hours if I went another 15 minutes, and my voice, as you can tell, is absolutely completely shot. So I need a break for that. But thanks everybody for joining. Love to see the feedback you guys are sharing, and it's great to be part of this community and see the excitement for new products and the excitement for having me do these videos and the interaction you guys provide with a lot of this stuff. And it's good to hear your feedback on that stuff, because I'm only one person. I work in in one particular set of circumstances, and my view of what's going on in the video world at large is mostly based on the feedback that you guys give me. So I appreciate you doing that. If you're watching this video after the fact, you can certainly leave questions below the video in the comment section below, and I will certainly do my best to try and answer them. But also, you can join us over on my Discord server, so djp.ly/discord. Look at there. It looks like my copy of Companion actually crashed, so I can't do the graphic for that. But anyway, so any questions about this, leave those here or join me over on Discord. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I like to do production-related content, video and audio, here on this channel whenever I have the time to do so. It's certainly not for lack of ideas to produce more, just more a matter of finding the time to do it. Yeah, I've got a lot of ideas, and eventually I will get to all of them. And just as a heads up, this channel, as it exists with this type of content, is going to be hitting 10 years here this fall, and I will be doing something to kind of celebrate that. I don't know what that's going to look like, and that's several months away at this point, but yes, coming up on 10 years of doing this, pretty amazing. So, yeah. But anyway, I think that's going to about do it for now. So see if I can relaunch Companion here so I can control my switcher again. There we go. But again, thanks for joining, everybody, and be sure and come back for other content here on the channel. If you are going to be at NAB and you happen to see me, please stop and say hi. I do like interacting with you guys and hearing from you and finding out what you're up to and hearing a little bit about your business and what you're doing. I find that stuff very interesting, and I like being able to put faces with names. So, yeah, please do say hello if you see me. I'll be there Monday and Tuesday on the show floor. So, but anyway, that's about it. So thanks, everyone, for watching, and have a fantastic day.